Okay, for people who are joining the live stream, we are back after a hiatus to continue the never-ending process of working on updates to the Wolfram language. So this is language completeness and consistency meeting, and let's start off with the allowed heads extension. Oh my, okay.
Right. So
this already sounds scary.
Yes. Right. So I while you're updating, I can describe roughly.
I don't know whether I need to update. I think it auto updates, unless there's something that you did today.
No, I last committed it Friday, I think. Certainly last week.
Okay. All right. So, let's assume this is going to work. Okay.
Oh, did I not actually commit it? That would be very.
Well, maybe I need to do a docs update.
Okay. Let me. Oh dear, I didn't actually push it out. I'm sorry.
Okay. Do you want to send it to me as email, or no? That's not going to work.
Yeah, I'll just go ahead and commit it right now. I have the window open. Head featureized note.
But I am actually running the update right now. So is that going to clobber something?
It may or may not. I guess we'll find out.
Unless you changed it locally, Stephen, it shouldn't. But you'll probably have to update again.
It'll just put a lock in until one of the others done.
Okay. All right. Tell me when I can update. Can I update now?
Yes.
All right. So you were offering to talk through what this is while it was updating.
Yep. So the basic issue is there are some situations where we want to control what heads we enter into, but there are other situations where that's not enough. For example, if in dimensions, for example, if you want to treat symmetrized array and quantity array at the same level as both, the same head as a list type head. So Rob has proposed extending the syntax to say, not only are these both heads we can enter into, but these heads should be considered as exactly the same. And so you see that featureized note, and then there's an example below to clarify that in scope.
Okay, treat them.
So you see in the inner level, we have G and H. And just because we can enter G and H, doesn't mean they're the same head for making it a rectangular expression.
Mm-hmm. I see. So, but where else is allowed heads used?
It's basically dimensions and array depth. The cases where this, I mean, they're
well, we also do it in total. I don't know that in total, right? Total doesn't care about being rectangular, so this extension isn't applicable to total.
What will it do in that case? What will it do if you give it? It'll treat it the same as the previous case here.
Correct. At least it should. I guess I didn't actually test that, but I wanted this syntax reviewed before I finalized the code review. So,
yes, this should work in total. Where it will not work is transpose.
And why is allowed head not something that things like map care about? I mean, this is basically a should you go in there question.
Right. It's, I mean, I suppose we could consider adding these to map and other such things.
But so let me just characterize what allowed heads is. I mean, could thread, a multi-level thread, could it have an allowed heads option?
I think so.
Do we have a multi-level thread?
I think so.
Internally,
well,
we
certainly map thread.
Right.
Oops.
Yeah, map thread is certainly a good case because right now map thread requires a list head, and that's been a complaint for a while that it requires in the second argument it really wants those to be lists and not
yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
Things. I do like your idea. Okay, so really it's not really as the same head. Into which?
It's effectively the same.
No, I understand, but the same as what? Into the heads of sub-expressions into which it may descend. And the question is, what about the overarching wrapper? Okay, so in the case of dimensions, that isn't really the right description, because isn't it the case here that so this is saying it's not into which, it's through which a function may descend. I mean, in other words, because it could be at many levels. In other words, in the case of a dimensions, there could be 6 different levels, which are randomly F's and G's.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so what's the difference between the case where...
Right, so in N of 1 in that futurized example, it's treated as a matrix because G and H are being treated as the same head at level 2, whereas in right. So if
but they'd also be the same head. If I said G of that, then it would also work. G of H,
right,
and so on. It would also work, right?
Exactly. So right. So if you actually compare with the previous example, so in the previous example, there's G and G. And if we had just explicitly listed F, G, and H instead of using all, we would get that 2-3 result. But when there's G and H at the same level, then it's not the fact that what you can descend into, it's what are you considering the same at a given level.
I understand. So but all means descend into anything, but it means don't do this identification. I mean, probably we're going to need a full or something like that to say not only do you treat it as, you get what I'm saying? Not only do you, I mean, in that case, in the case of full, it would descend then. It would, if it said full, it'll basically descend all the way to atoms, right? Because that's the only thing that wouldn't be, in the case of all, the stopping point is when you don't have fullness, sort of rectangularity at a given level, right? Because you've got different heads at those different levels, right? But so if we allowed something like full to mean the not the list thing, but the alternatives thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then that would be a way
right, of getting basically the maximum depth that all sub-expressions share.
Down to atoms. Now, I assume that this is...
Well, I mean, not down. In the case of dimensions...
I see. In the case of dimensions, it would stop because it isn't rectangularized anymore.
Exactly.
Okay, but so the main point here is, on a given level, for purposes of map, it couldn't really care. The distinction between F comma G and F or alternatives G,
right,
doesn't really care about those. It's the case of the rectangularity function, so to speak, that they care.
Exactly.
All right, this seems okay. Although I recommend also allowing the full case.
Yeah, that's fine. That's easy enough to do.
Okay. All right. I think this is good.
Okay.
I don't know if there's anything that we, as I don't think we should say as the same head. We got to make this clearer. We got to make this clearer what this means.
It's equivalent at a given level.
You could have allow any of the H of I at a given level.
No, because this says allow any of the H of I. I mean, the one before it says the same. Okay. At a given level, allow any of the HI.
Allow any one of the HI.
Okay.
Right, so I think it should be at a given level, allow any one of the HI.
You know what? I don't want to say level because that's, I think we need to have a separate note for functions such as dimensions. Could whoever's making a grinding noise, please stop. For functions such as dimensions, the form requires that all elements at a given level have the same head. Treats, let's call them. As interchangeable, as equivalent. Something like that. I don't know. What do you think of that?
Well, I preferred the same because you used same head in the sentence below, which I think does clarify it a lot.
Sorry, I'm sorry. What are you suggesting?
I'm suggesting you treat the H sub I as the same.
No, that's not what I said. It requires that all elements have the same head.
Or effectively the same.
I don't want to say as effectively the same because that suggests that the evaluated value somehow has changed. I think interchangeable would be better.
That's fine.
All right, I'm okay with this. And then we'd also add the full case. Here, do you agree? Which would be just basically treat heads as interchangeable. Is that right? Oh, why isn't this got a 12.1 plus tag there?
It just needs to be default changed. I'll get that done. Probably be normal expression heads, but what is a normal expression head? Or more importantly, what's not a normal expression head?
I don't know. What's the answer, guys? I think it's something. It's a decorated headdress thing.
Well, normal expressions are the ones that the full form is literally head of args. And the one exception to this case, where we allow things besides normal expression, is association.
Okay, Rob, you're the implementer here. What does it mean?
It basically means expressions which we can descend into directly via the full form.
I see.
And association is the one exception, but it of course has its special dogma thing.
We need to basically say this. So expect to add a few notes. Why don't you propose some notes for this that clarify that? Make sense?
Okay, fine.
Unless you need me to write them.
No, I think we can write something in terms of atom Q.
Sounds good to me. All right, let's go on to the next item if we can. Ready? Okay, the random number state.
Right, so this was just a thread that came up, and right, there is this internal random get random state, but I'm not sure how we want to expose this. And since Rob is the expert on such things,
Okay, so block random is so. Rob, can you speak to what the issues are here?
Okay, but the issues are that the random generators keep a state. Because that was done some while ago, those are actually stored as big integers.
As opposed to what?
Well, they could be some kind of numeric array.
That's a random state.
Right. And what that is that gives you the random state of the current.
So why is that
generator.
Not the equivalent of get random state?
Get random state gives you the entire random state for all generators in the whole system. What
does that mean?
Okay, well, if you've say the default generator is the CA 30 generator. Okay, but suppose you've set up some other state. Okay, so some other generator. Get random state will give you the state for that generator as well. Because if you switch back to that generator with seed random, you'll want to go back to exactly where you were before.
Right, and I would like to point out that according to the documentation, $random state is obsolete and has been superseded by block random.
Okay. So this is a proposal. Okay, so let me understand. So first point is there's in principle a random stack, a stack of random things that is block random. You can have nested block randoms that define a stack of random states, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And what this would be about is explicitly storing a value for the purposes of building your own, random state maintenance system, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So set random state seems like a tough thing to implement because, if I say essentially $random state equals 17, does that guarantee that it is actually an allowable possible state for the randomness system?
No.
Okay. Well, what does set random state do right now?
I think set random state does have some checking. I honestly don't remember how much checking it has.
Okay. Well, so
Oh, I was muted. I believe set random state wants something that looks like the output of get random state.
I see. Okay. And so right now there is a $random state, which is bizarrely just an integer, but it could be an opaque random state object, correct?
Sure. I think that would be some sort of backward incompatibility. I'm not sure how serious it would be.
Why is it a backward incompatibility?
Well, because $random state is. If you were proposing to literally reuse $random state,
I'm not sure that I am, but
yes.
But the only incompatibility would be if somebody took $random state and used the bits in the integer to do something.
Mm-hmm. Right, and yeah,
right, and it's been obsolete for 5 to 10 years now as well.
Yeah, since V6, so that's like 12 years. Right, and I find it curious that I don't see the integer that's output by $random state in the output of get random state. So are these just two completely separate systems, or?
By the way, Brian, could we please fix the stupid misalignment?
The alignment issue. Yeah, that showed up
I've
in a bunch of
reported it
places,
like
and it's-
18 times. It's crazy.
The weird thing is if you actually click that triangle, it realigns. It's a graphics caching issue. I think it realigned, right? Actually got bigger, which is also weird.
Well, whatever. It's just
Yeah.
The $random state is only for the legacy pre-version 6 random generators.
Okay.
I see. For the thing called random. So this is deeply deprecated.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So we could reuse it if we wanted to. Okay. So the concept would be to have a random state object that is $random state.
Right, or perhaps $block random state, just for clarity that this is a new thing. But
maybe, but okay. But anyway, so the basic point is that gives you were you to call random integer right now, what state object would it use? And by wrapping it in a random state object, we could say seed random state object, presumably. Is that right? In other words, saying $random state equals, what does seed random return? Wow, it returns nothing. Interesting. What about having it return a random state object?
It could do. Yep.
Yeah, I don't see any problem with that.
I could imagine there's code where people have that on a separate line, but so long as the random state object is attractive looking, I don't think anybody's going to be upset by the fact that it.
Well, there is some cost in instantiating the random state object.
I see. Well, couldn't we have it be lazy somehow? No, because it could get saved in a notebook. But seed random, what would seed random return if it didn't return a random state object? What is the difference? Okay, so to me, an obvious thing would be seed random of an integer returns a random state object. Seed random of that random state object is equivalent to typing seed random of the integer. Do you agree?
Yes, that should be equivalent. I'm not sure what you get by having gain out of having seed random return a random state object.
Well, maybe we don't get anything. Now, what about with block random? What if block random were to set an initialization? Yeah, if it had a 2-argument form that was block random of a random state object, comma expa. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or even a kind of an interesting form would be a block random of a seed, comma expa. See what I'm saying?
Well, we already have a seeding option
for block random.
Right, random seeding, don't we? Yeah.
Okay, fine. Well, this might be a syntactic alternative to random seeding. Because random seeding is something that happens in other functions. But random seeding would then be allowed to take a random state object, right? And the whole point is that you could recover. What would be the point here? So $random state would give you the random state object at that moment in time so that you could go back and recover that. Right?
Right. And as an argument to seed random or as a possible value for the random seeding option, I mean, that's the same, the same level of difficulty. I mean, it's just another way of doing.
Wait a minute. Did that work? And what's the difference between generate symmetric key? Okay.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, the conversion from string to integer is, some legacy thing that we kept exactly the same as it was before for backward compatibility.
Okay, what about a general expression?
I believe a general expression, no.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
Yeah.
Okay, but generate, does this work? What the heck is that? Do you understand that error? The thing is expecting raw bits. Oh, I see.
But yeah, bytes, I presume.
That's wild and woolly. Here's a question. What is the relationship between the random seeding stuff and cryptographically secure seeding? Because one could imagine some key derivation function being run. I don't know what, in other words, if you're using this to generate, it depends what you're using the randomness for. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So we need to make sure that the key derive, which is the key derivation function, that what is it called? What is it called? Wait a minute. Generate derived.
Is it derived key?
Yeah, derived key is what we're trying to get out. Generate derived key. Okay. So
right. I mean, I should point out that my guess is, I don't know the internals of the cryptographic functions, but my guess is that they are treating the string as some sort of UTF-8 object. Now, because of backward compatibility, the way strings are treated by seed random is if they only contain plain 0 Unicode, create an integer base 250, base 65535 out of those code points, and use that to seed the random, seed random. Otherwise, I think I don't remember if we switch to UTF-8 or if we blow it up into, a base 2 to the 32, UCS4 sort of thing.
Let's find out. But the point that I'm making is that derived key should dovetail, and we should also make sure that we actually, in seed random and things like that we point to derived key and vice versa. Okay. Should I make those changes?
Sure.
I mean, I think seed random is the place where we should be. This is the place where we should point to generate derived key. Gosh, I can't remember. For some reason, I've just forgotten. Control Shift Command. What is the U? Yeah. My gosh, I go away for 5 weeks or something altogether, and I already forget that. Okay, generate derived key. I think that's relevant there. And then from generate derived key, we want to point to seed random. Now, okay, by the way, somebody has got a lot of background noise. I mean, a lot of just noise. It might be you. Now we don't. Now the noise has gone away.
Okay, all right. There's not a lot of noise around me, but
no, it's fine. Now,
okay.
Maybe it wasn't you. Okay. No, it's perfect. Okay. All right. So again, let's make sure that seed random can eat some other foods. Okay, including derived key and so on. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I think it should also be able to eat hashes. And I don't mean hash browns or anything like that, but you understand what I mean. The output of hash should be able to be fed as something to seed random. Make sense?
Right. I mean, most outputs are either strings or
byte arrays.
Yes, they're right. It can also be integers. So maybe byte arrays are the one thing it doesn't understand.
Okay. Brian from our live stream asked a good question. How would hardware generated seeds be supported? And for example, these physically, what are they called? PFCs, what are they called? Physical, what the heck are those things? Well, okay, so this hardware generated seeds, what would happen there? How would that work? I mean, we don't right now have a way, that's a system call, right? That goes and fetches a hardware generated seed, I think.
Right.
But we don't currently have such a system call, such a thing packaged as a function.
No, right. I mean, we do have Vernier link. So to the extent that any such things communicate with the Vernier protocol, you could probably...
That's an unlikely. I mean, I don't actually know. There was a big thing a few years ago that there started to be, Johnson noise from resistors that were as accessible from typical Intel microprocessors. But I don't even know. I don't know how that's. Rob, do you know anything about that?
When I was doing the parallel stuff, which I guess I see now as version 8, I thought about that, and there was no clear way to easily do it.
Let's look again. See whether there's an easy system call there now.
Okay.
And if there is, we might even consider. So that would be, what would that be? I mean, that would be a physical. That would be a method option effectively for, what would it be? What would that be? What kind of a thing is that? Because our current random state, clearly when you have a physical, when you have something which is sort of a physical source of randomness, it has nothing to do with the random state object. Right?
Right.
Right. And
so, for example, it couldn't be a method option for random integer unless there was a special form of random state object that says, I'm a non pseudo random state object, if you understand what I'm saying.
Well, that would be for that method. So you'd have a new method, which would be
right.
Physical noise or something like that. I don't know what you call the method, but
I mean, I would think that the random seeding would be the right place to put this, right? So random seeding goes to, physical noise generator of foo that
where does it go into random integer?
Well, I guess
no.
You're right.
I don't think you put it in random integer. It goes in seed random. So we have these methods you can switch to, and that's just a different method.
Which would be called by, which will be specified. I see. So seed random defines both the, but okay, look, here's the problem. You might very well want to, it might be an expensive thing to get a random physical bit. Okay, so you want to get one of those as the seeding, but then use pseudo-randomness from then on out. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah. So
how would you do that?
Oh, well, then in that case, what you'd want to set up an interface. So for maybe a special token for seed random that would tell it get the seed from hardware or something like that. I mean, we already have this automatic which uses a combination of the current time and some weird stuff to make it as different as possible, as unique as possible. Uses the process ID and the current time and stuff like that. So we could just have another token besides automatic, which says, get it from this hardware thing.
But that's the method. Okay, so, but these methods here are forward-looking methods that say how to generate randomness from here on out.
Right.
Okay. But so what you're proposing here, actually,
I think what he's proposing is not a new method, but a new first argument, right?
Yeah, I think that's what he's proposing, right? But he's proposing seed random physical or something, except that then
it would need to be a head, right? The physical would need to be a head which contains information about which physical object. So it would be distinguishable from a string, which is a valid seed random value, and also
we've got device execute. We've got a random device in the device framework. So arguably what this should be is just a seed random of a device execute of some kind of random thing. I thought we had some in the devices framework that we have something which is a random device.
Like from using urandom or something, maybe? This sounds vaguely familiar.
Yeah, I thought that Igor had implemented such a thing. Why isn't there a list of devices here? Like there's a list of service connections and so on. Brian, that would be a question for you.
Yeah, it could probably be there. I mean, it was
maybe under related guides.
Yeah, I mean, he means there's a link up in the title for Service Connect.
But now I'm really confused here because I thought
there just aren't very many devices. Maybe that was why.
Look, random signal demo. Okay, that was what I had in mind. Right, but I don't even know how that. I mean, this would be the simple way to do this would be a device execute of some source of randomness in the outside world. Who knows what it is? But then it gets to say what it is. Make sense?
So we're relying on the device executing and returning something
that can be fed to seed random.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that's the cleanest way to deal with that. And that way, that is a first argument play in seed random, basically, that factors out the physical source of randomness from our, purely computational processes here.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that could work. That could work for any device where your read list could give integers, for example.
Sure. But we should find out. Let's find out what's involved in accessing the hardware random generators. And then, we should worry a little bit whether the device framework is an excessive overhead if we really want to use this in some serious way. But I think so random state object is what we think will store. I mean, it's a little weird because not only does it store the state of the random generator, it stores what generator it is. Am I making sense? So seed random says, this is the seed and here's the generator to use.
Right. And it actually goes further than that. It stores all the generators that have been seeded.
Well, that doesn't make sense to me. Oh, you mean so that?
Yeah. So if you do say seed random of.
Wait a sec. Can I pick the method option separately in random integer, independent of reseeding?
No.
Okay, fine. So in order to change the method of the random generator, I've got to go back to seed random to do it, right?
You have to go back to seed random. Yeah.
Or exit block random, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Okay, so I'm sorry. So why does the random state object store the states of all the random generators?
Okay, so suppose I do the sequence of following commands. So suppose I do seed random, say 1, 2, 3.
Mm-hmm.
And I generate some random numbers. And then I do seed random, method goes to Mersenne Twister.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then I generate a few random numbers. Okay, so then if you really want to have the full state at the exit, so it'll mark at that point the current method as being Mersenne Twister. But suppose you go back to method goes to extended CA again. Okay, you want to have exactly that same sequence, and that's the only way to preserve that entire sequence.
Ouch.
Across all the
methods. I get it. So you're saying, ow. So that means that at every stage, random state object has to store whatever. Wow, that's a horrifying, as von Neumann claimed, anybody who generates pseudorandom numbers is in a state of sin, so to speak. And this is this is already, this is kind of exposing that, right? Because what it's saying is, if at any point in the session you used some particular generator, forevermore we're going to have to carry around the state of that generator. That's really pretty horrifying. You got what I'm saying? Because you're saying otherwise you can't unroll it.
Yes, you can't unroll it. And since, it's only a tiny percent of people that actually use any other generator, it's probably not a big issue. And that's why.
Well, except that it's a weird, just think about, some sandboxing thing where somebody is kind of trying to pass information from, this is some horrible security issue. Weird, completely weird. I passed information in the random seeding system.
Sure.
That's a horrifying case. Let's think about this for a second. So you say it ran for a while, then you redid the seeding. Why exactly should you be allowed to rerun seed random just with a method option? I know we currently allow that, to switch between methods without breaking the sequence, so to speak. You get what I'm saying? In other words, you're right now allowed to change methods, but maintaining the sort of flow of randomness. Get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, that's where we're getting ourselves in trouble. Does anybody care about that? I mean, I think that was a precursor to block random. I would say block random would deal with that now. By the way, random seeding can't specify a method for randomness unless you went through random state object, correct? And I think it's also weird that seed random doesn't return a random state object. And if it was not the case that you had to go back and find all these previous sort of legacy random states, then there would be no issue with instantiating the random state object, correct?
Well, there's some cost to it. We have to create the current form of what the random state object is.
Surely that can be done lazily. So if it is never returned, it just disappears. We never create it.
But if you have seed random return it, it's returned, right?
Well, not if what's returned is essentially a promise to go get it.
Yes, we could have it as a raw expr that if it's put in a notebook, then it can expand out.
Or if you say x equals seed random, it's got to expand as well. But yeah, I mean, it's essentially a delayed value thing.
Well, that wouldn't even have to expand.
Okay,
It's
just referring to the
serialized that.
Okay, fine.
That could be done. I mean, that's a pretty heavy mechanism for a small part of the system, but it can be done.
I mean, is it complicated really to do that? Don't we have a million other things that do the same thing?
No, our system has improved for that, but it could still be improved a bit further.
Okay, but let's come back. Why don't you guys think through this question of whether we really need the remethoding of random numbers as opposed to reseeding? Get what I'm saying? Whether now that we have block random, do we need remethoding? Okay.
Well,
do you understand what I mean by that?
But the whole block random method, the whole block random seeding thing works through seed random.
You mean implementationally?
Yes.
Oh, who cares? I mean, you can make that work. That's not the issue. Block random has its own way of working. What we care about here is what does seed random actually do, and how do you return a random state object from seed random? Right? Block random is simply returning the random system to the state before block random was called, right? So that's just going to go on doing that. The question is, if you explicitly call seed random, do I need to repeat what I just said? We got reseeding and we've got remethoding. Did you get what I'm saying?
Right.
Okay. Do we care about remethoding with seed random?
I mean, I think that's how we've documented that people can change them. How is? I mean.
No. Listen to what I'm saying. Listen to what I'm saying. I'm saying, can you remethod without reseeding? Get what I'm saying? You can clearly remethod with reseeding. And you could also say seed random automatic method error, whatever. The question is, does changing the method reseed the random number generator or not?
No.
Does it keep? I understand that it doesn't right now. I understand that. I understand that's implementationally how block random works. What I'm asking is, does anybody care about the fact that changing the method doesn't reseed the generator? I don't think they care, because without random state object or block random, they can't return to the previous thing anyway.
You're fine. So we could disallow that.
Right. So can you please just think this through and not in this meeting, just to make sure that we're not missing something here? Okay. So my proposal is we disallow that. Seed random returns a random state object. Okay. And could also be fed a random state object. So could block random be fed a random state object. So could random seeding be fed a random state object. And that's kind of where we're at. I think also that these various cryptographic functions should be able to be fed random state objects. And the seeding functions should be able to be fed the output of the cryptographic functions. Make sense?
I don't know. That's not clear to me, but I don't know that there's anybody in this meeting who can really speak to that.
Okay. I'm pretty sure it's right. So let's assume it's right. And if it's wrong, you can tell me it's wrong. All right. We need to continue this meeting because we need to just cover some of these other things here quickly. Okay. Tables in documentation. Okay. This is something I care about here. Okay. So the issue is right now, if I want to get Brian, this is for you. If I want to just get that list, do you see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
There's no easy way to get that list. I propose that it becomes a resource data object in the data repository, and that you figure out a way to, maybe it's a manual thing because it may not be easy to keep them. That we just simply put a note. For example, in here, we will put a note saying this table is available as resource data of whatever. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
So does the table include both columns, just a left-hand column?
It will be both columns, I think. I don't see why not. And if you want, because many uses of this, you'll end up wanting, a labeling. You want to put the labels from the right-hand side, and it might even have another column in it as well.
Right. I mean, that sort of, in terms of automating, right? I mean, we have 2 columns, we have 3 columns, we have the 3-column image style, which, right, one of the columns is a image rather.
Is this really right that the word simplified should be? Oh, I see. That's simplified treaties. Yeah, I get it. Okay, sorry, but please continue.
So, I mean, just in terms of automating, I'm not sure how automatable this is. And, having Brian go through 6,000 ref pages is not a scalable solution either.
Yeah, I think this would be a thing that we find specific pages that we want to do this for. I don't think we would.
I mean, there's like 50 of them. Okay,
if even that many.
Yeah,
but yeah, there are things like lists of instruments for various sound functions and things like that. Yeah, there are a number of these big tables that exist.
Actually, I'll tell you where you're also keeping this stuff is in the autocompleter. Right, that table must have found its way into the autocompleter. So whenever a table goes in the autocomplete system, then that's a key that you want to consider it as a resource object.
Well, maybe, but it's the autocompleter doesn't care if you have one thing or 50 things. If there's if it's one thing long, it seems silly to.
Right, and the autocompleter only knows about the left-hand column.
No, I understand that. I'm simply saying, for your purposes of tagging these things, looking at where you've got autocompleter things, that would be.
I think the places where we have autocomplete is much big. I mean, if you're talking about 50 pages, I mean.
No, I understand. I'm simply trying to get a way for Brian to help, to get a start on.
It'd be the course pass.
Pages.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I get what you're saying, and then that makes some sense. I have to talk to Sherlock.
Okay.
That list. Enough of these things are hard coded into the.
It doesn't really matter what I mean, how you get it, I don't care. But why don't you start exposing the places where we need this, and then there'll simply be a note right after the table that says the table is available. Computable version of the table is available in blah 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 place. Makes sense?
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah, Ethan on the live stream is commenting on the value of having more of the documentation be computable. I agree, and that's an interesting thing to think about.
I mean, Wolfram Language data could potentially have something like this too.
That was my suggestion.
Yep.
What would it be? What would that be? It would be a property for this particular function.
Maybe. I'm not sure what the generic name for it would be.
Well, I think it would be string values. It would be something like an associated string values as an association, and then the elements of the association would be things like, in this case, numeric systems or something.
So the keys in the association would need to be manually input, probably, because numeric systems is going to be, maybe this and one other page. It would be hard to come up with a set of keys that we could make these associations with that would be all inclusive.
Yeah. I agree with that.
Yeah. While we're on the subject of completions and notes tables, I would like to. I keep complaining about the fact that the thing that allows you to edit mod info. No, not edit mod info. What is it called? The thing that allows you to edit the auto completion list to generate and edit, is horribly broken. And 90% of the time, I just unformat the cell and manually edit things. And, because it's so hard to edit, Tom just keeps going and manually copying things into, the Git repo for code assist, which is just not a sustainable way to do this. I mean, we really should be trying to make it more automated from the documentation to get the completions in rather than less so. And it just doesn't seem to be a priority. So I think it should be a priority.
Noted.
Well, I guess the real question is, what does Stephen think?
No, I agree. I think we should make it as streamlined and automated as possible.
Okay.
And I think that's important. And I think that, I'm sort of fed up with finding these silly bugs where I think some things don't autocomplete.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're never going to be able to take the authors completely out of the loop. I agree with both of you, but there's always going to have to be some human element to tagging these things.
Sure. But, right now the obstacle is the obstacles are very high. So
Ethan on our live stream is talking about the auto completion of string option values, which I agree is actually not just option value. It's things in associations that are. I mean, there's a question of how much are we not get. Here's a question: if you look at examples in the documentation, and you ask the question, for anything which is a literal, as in a defined by the system thing, a string, a symbol name, whatever, which of them autocomplete? Do you get what I'm saying? At what stages, if we simply looked at all documentation and we said, let's take every string in the input in the documentation and break it at every possible point, does it autocomplete? Do you get what I'm asking, Brian?
You're saying, obviously you don't mean just user supplied junk strings.
No, I don't mean that. I mean
selectors.
That's why I said literals.
Yeah, well, okay. Fine.
Right. So the question would be, if you simply take every example in the documentation, break it at every point, is there an autocompletion from that point? And if not, why not? Because this is something, I hadn't really thought about this before, but I keep on reporting autocomplete bugs, right? And that's silly.
Right. We'd need some way to automate. So I guess this was turning into a bit of a John Foltz question of, doing the equivalent of hitting Command K after every comma to see if autocompletions come up. Right. And sort of programmatically test things that way, which, I agree would be a worthwhile test. I just don't know how to implement that, but maybe John, we can ask John and see if he, but I would love to have tests like that. Because every now and then I discover, either missing things or things that used to complete, Sherlock changed something and suddenly all of my completion's
So
gone away.
okay, so listen. So QA needs to. I hadn't thought of this idea before, but QA needs to do something with this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and meanwhile, Brian, as our first step in making documentation more computable, Brian is going to try and identify some of these things. Whether it goes into Wolfram Language data, we can talk about that later once we see what they are.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay, let's very quickly go through the last two here.
Right. So let me just say that between Lou being busy with Wolfram Alpha Notebook Edition and me being busy with notarization, we actually haven't developed a proposal. So it might be worth just bumping large objects till next time. But
okay. I mean, right, but okay. So, but that's a system. That's something where does the short happen, basically? Is that right?
Where does the short happen, and how do we still make it accessible to the user if they want it, is the basic idea.
That idea, worms its way back into short itself. Because it's the same question. To my mind, it's the same thing that we're now doing with a lot of things from audio to data set and so on. It's like, do you store it in the notebook or not? I mean, in other words, let's say you had a short, you used short in a notebook, and it gave you a shortened version of something, and you come back a year later and you say, oh, I want to see more details, right? Mm-hmm. Is it a tough luck situation or not?
Yes.
Well, okay, but listen. That's the same thing as we get with giant data sets, with giant audio, and so on, where we now have this framework where we say, store a notebook or don't. See what I'm saying?
Right, but I mean, yes, I mean the messages have added additional complexities, right? Because you're not necessarily generating the input.
No, I realize that. I'm talking about short itself. I'm talking about the fact that somebody has something in a notebook that says short, and I think it's useful to give them the option. Is it just short for your current purposes, or do you always want to short it, so to speak?
Mm-hmm.
Right, and I think that's exactly the same story as the audio objects and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So I recommend that this thing, that some part of this becomes part of the general discussion of short, but let's wait for your proposal for the rest of it. Okay, this last one about Samba shares.
Right, so this is something you said you want to discuss, and everybody was sort of staring confused at each other, so I'm like, okay, well, since nobody seems to know what you're getting at, we'll just discuss it in LCC and go from there.
Okay, fine. I mean, so I don't necessarily understand it myself, right? So this is something where I have files that, so when I use Mac OS,
mm-hmm.
I've got a Samba mount point for, I mean, honestly, my desktop machine doesn't make any difference because it mounts at boot time. But like for my laptops, this thing I have to, maybe I'm doing something goofy here, but if I'm going to use this, I have to explicitly mount it,
mm-hmm.
right? Because I don't leave it mounted by default because it's going over the network and it will be crazy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
Okay, so my question is, in Wolfram Language, don't we want a programmatic way to do that mount? Because otherwise I have to go out to the operating system. Let's say I want to access a file that's on my Samba mount
mm-hmm.
point or whatever it's called, right? Wouldn't it be nice if I could programmatically request that? And given that we now have system keychain support, if there is an authentication that needs to happen at that to access that, to mount that file system, we could just do that.
Okay.
That was my point.
Okay. So I guess my well, I'm going to give you one of my nicer responses, which is I don't think that's crazy.
Okay.
It's
better than I expected. Okay.
Yeah. I'm not sure what my slightly longer answer is I'm not sure is right. Then there was this thing about URL read.
What the heck is that about?
That just means that it is accessible using URL read, nothing more than that.
What success? The Samba mount.
Yeah. I mean, it's a network protocol, so obviously it is available through URL read, nothing more.
But you're saying that there is a version of it. I mean, I don't know what, if I bring it up, like, I don't even know what to do here. I'm going to show. Yeah, I mean, it's all kinds of weird mounty things here.
So mounty thing is different. There you can just access, copy file and whatever. But what if it is not mounted?
No, I understand. That's what I'm asking. So is it the case? So if I go to, so that's a URL basically. And you're telling me that if I go to that URL with the appropriate authentication, I will be able to get to those files. Is that correct? Without quotes mounting it?
Yes.
And the value of mounting it is what? That it shows up in the Finder or what?
Then it's just a local drive. That's it.
Right. So once it's mounted, right, it appears, it's accessible to everything and appears on the local file system, right?
But under the hood, is it still doing some network request? Yes, it must be.
Yes.
Right.
So it's not faster if it's mounted or anything like that, is it?
No, it shouldn't be.
How does the authentication work? Does the authentication, don't I have to authenticate every time if I do the explicit URL read?
It should, well, we could work on caching it, but I mean, that could be solved.
Right. Yeah. So the point is, if you mount it, then you only need to authenticate once, and then everything appears as a local file. If you just do a copy file or using some URL read thing, then each time you access a file, it will need to re-authenticate.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so there's a value to this mounting idea.
Right. Yeah, and the point with URL read is that, right now it returns an HTTP. This isn't sort of explicitly documented, but effectively what it returns is a HTTP response object, which, if we're using the SMB protocol, really doesn't make any sense. So we need to think some about what. URL execute, I think, is the one.
URL execute with an SMB would return, no, it's URL read that returns
URL read, yes.
Response object. URL execute just does returns the body.
Right. So URL read is.
It could just return the string because that's what we do for FTP.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Okay, so
is documented in a wonky way is all there is to it. I mean,
okay.
I'm sorry. What do you mean? The URL read? You're saying URL read has a different case for things
FTP.
other than HTTP.
Yeah, we just return the string because we don't know what to do.
Is that documented somewhere?
No, obviously not.
Oh, okay.
Because it would look ridiculous if we return an HTTP response for FTP.
Right.
And
okay, so hold on. So what we've exposed here is two issues. One issue is, what does URL read do on a non-HTTP URL? Right?
Yes.
I mean, arguably, we should have a more generic response.
Well, yes, it should always have been that way, but I'm not going to get angry with it, but it should have returned byte array. I don't know if we had byte array when URL read was
I don't think it should return byte array. That's useless.
Okay, fine.
I think it's great what it returns. I think it's great that it returns an object. I think the issue is only...
Okay, I have objections to that because when you do URL read of an URL and you get an object, then you have to figure out what to do with the object rather than just having some data with you. But that's fine.
No, it depends what the data is. It depends whether the data is useful.
Well, if somebody is reading an HTTP, why don't we return the HTML? Because that's what people are interested in.
But that's the body.
Okay.
That's not the headers, for example. They might also want the headers.
Okay.
I think what we have is fine. I mean, I think what we are effectively returning is an associate. But I mean, I don't know what FTP returns. I don't know whether it just returns the content body, or I'm sure FTP also returns status codes and things.
It does as a part of headers. Yes, it does.
Okay, so then it really needs a URL response, basically, of some kind.
Yes.
So okay. So do we have an FTP server somewhere so you can show us what this actually looks like when we? Because you're claiming that URL read as is can read from an FTP.
Let me just check the bugs.
Okay.
Oh, actually, there is one. Let me see but it may require password or something. It's the LDAP stuff.
No, we're not going to do LDAP. Let's just find a random FTP server out on the web. Let's see. I mean, there's got to be some FTP for some government site. Let's see. Here we go.
There is this one.
Which one? Did you send it to
Yeah,
me?
I am sending that. Where is the delete? You could try that. It's a group chat, or I sent it to you directly.
No, I got it.
Okay.
What the heck is that?
Oh, well, it didn't work.
I have no idea what that is, so. Let's just see whether we can find a random thing out on the web that is a. This is very confusing. This claims to be an FTP server, yet it presents itself as a web server. That's super confusing. It's one of these cases. I wonder if somebody on our live stream knows a random FTP server. Oh, come on now. Okay, hold on. Could you not type in our ear, please?
I'm using a headset. I don't
think it's you. We've got to have. Well, this is crazy that we can't find an FTP server. Okay, in any case, you're saying that the FTP server will simply. I mean, I know the FTP server because I remember from using FTP for millions of years ago that it returns all kinds of status codes, right?
Yes, it does. It does.
I mean, I'm just finding a random page on the web. This is what it looks like, right?
Mm-hmm.
FTP, blah, 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 blah. Give a password. So it is not the case that returning a string is the right thing to do.
Right, and it's also state-based, so that will make things more interesting. But
okay, but so what you're telling me is that we've not done a good job. Terrific. This is an FTP server, random government FTP server. Thank you to Brian. Okay, whatever this is. Fire incident data. Okay, terrific. Let's see how we get to some of it. What is this? Oh, that's an FTP site. Okay, so that is so bizarrely confusing what this is doing. So this is saying, so if I now just do a URL read of that FTP.
it's assuming, could you do FTP : // ? And why don't you actually go to one of the you'll have to grab the file, because see, it's hard to justify what protocol you're using. So as long as it's a file, it will work. If it's a folder, it won't.
Okay. I think I'm about to get. Okay, so you're saying if I go to this.
Is it a file?
No, that's
a folder.
it's an empty directory. So
Great. I thought I was going to get a photograph of some fire somewhere. Who knows?
Yeah, that would work. Yeah, try one of those.
Okay, but now what do? I replace that by FTP?
Yep.
Great.
Okay, so maybe they don't have an FTP server anymore, despite their claims.
Okay. Oh, there's another FTP server somebody is providing here. Okay. It's a speed test FTP server. Right, let's try this one.
No, it has to be. Yeah, see, you'll get that problems because what it's doing under the hood is assuming it's HTTP, so it's setting some requests.
Okay, so in fact, it doesn't work. So URL read, in fact, does not work with FTP.
It does, as long as it's a file. So that's not a file. That's a server address. So it has to be an actual file. So as you saw,
you're telling me if I go to a terminal,
yeah,
and I start FTP, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Stephen, add the slash 300, or sorry, 3 MB in caps .zip to the URL. So an in of 12.
Yeah.
Add slash 3 MB in caps .zip lowercase. Yeah. Okay. Well, then I think URL read is just broken because that's certainly a bug.
Yeah, that's a bug because what version are you using? Pretty sure I fixed. Okay. No, this needs to be fixed.
Okay, well, look, FTP support. I mean, what other protocols? So look, okay, what you were basically saying is that URL read is really set up for HTTP stuff, and it does fine for that. But these other protocols, of which FTP is one obvious one, SMB is another one, are not really properly supported here.
Yes, that's correct.
So we should look into what it would take to understand how to support these. Yeah.
I mean, we've had this discussion before, but it never went anywhere, not in terms of actionable items.
No, I understand. Anachroic Nomad on our live stream is commenting about the way that you actually use FTP in this sequential fashion. Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's not, and the fact that we can't even find any FTP servers on the web makes it not as exciting to support FTP. But this mounting and SMB business is a different thing because that's still alive and well. I mean, we should ask the Stuart and people like that in the data feeds group whether we're still using FTP to get data from who knows where. Where NORAD or the FAA or whatever else. They may very well still be using FTP. Let's find out. Can somebody ask Stuart, please, that question?
And also SFTP.
Wait. I want to check that somebody can actually do that before we move on.
I can do that, Stephen.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead, Fahim.
I was saying that SFTP is also being used. I just had a query about that where our solutions group was quite interested in having that work.
Okay, fine. Let's get a sense of what is being done with it, whether it is a one-shot use or whether it's some kind of exploratory use that involves old, as Anachronic Nomad says, 1980s sense stuff.
Right. So, by the way, I just tried this in 11.3 and it works. So, and yes, what you get is just a string out for in
So
of
something
13.
went wrong there. Okay, so something went wrong.
I just want to make a comment. It could be like IMAP link. So FTP is very similar to IMAP, where you have state-based protocol. It's a ping pong protocol where you do CD and whatnot.
I just think this is one of these. Why the heck are we supporting
Yeah,
this?
exactly. That's what it is. So the fact that we have something where you can just get files, that's good enough.
I
So
think so.
I
Right.
think that's good enough.
Okay. So on our live stream, Brian mentions supporting non-SMB file systems across operating systems and the mounting of those. Yeah, I think that's worth looking at. I don't know whether there is an operating system mount command that, there used to be back in the day in Unix, there was just a mount command. I have no idea how that relates to SMB or how it relates to,
It still exists in Mac OS and Linux. I don't know about iOS or Android and
okay, but is it equivalent as mount? Can mount an SMB file system or not?
it should be able to. It just you need to specify the type.
This was
Right.
last edited in 1994.
Yeah, but it's been updated. I mean, Mount has been updated. Mount understands APFS and things. I mean, so maybe they haven't bothered to update the man page, but and even if it's not directly through Mount, I mean, I'm sure there are other commands that can be used.
All right, look, let's go find out and let's see whether this is something that's worth dealing with. I think it is, because I think it's useful, certainly in my own work, because I have a network, network file system out there. I would certainly use it. Okay, and meanwhile, this whole question about other protocols than HTTP, let's hear about that again in another meeting and talk about what support, if any, we want to have for those. Fair?
Okay.
And it sounds like there's a bug for Fahim with FTP right now.
Okay, I will address that.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Terrific. Thanks all.
Cheers,
Thanks
bye.
to folks on the live stream. Talk to you all soon.
Bye.
Bye.